Tonight, you are going to sleep in a world that has never heard of blackout curtains. Weighted blankets sold in careful shades of gray, blue light glasses, sleep trackers, or one last glance at a glowing screen before bed. There is no app to measure your rest. No alarm hidden in the dark waiting to pull you forward. No late message asking for your attention. There is only the room, the weather outside it, the people and creatures folded somewhere into its corners, and the slow, honest disappearance of daylight. The day has ended the old way by running out of light. You are inside a one-room medieval house, the sort of place where nearly everything important happens close to the fire and close to the floor. Smoke lives in the rafters, straw hides in corners, a bench, a pot, a chest, a few pegs, a few tools, a folded cloak, a ladle with a bent handle, a stool worn smooth by the same body sitting in the same place every evening. These are the landmarks of the room. The walls are not straight enough to be proud. The roof is not tight enough to be trusted without question. Yet in the black of the village night, this little house is still what matters most. It is the difference between weather and shelter, between drifting cold and chosen warmth, between the endless dark outside and the soft, limited darkness that belongs to people. At the center of it all is the hearth. It is smaller now than it was at supper. Earlier, it boiled the pot, lit faces, dried wet hems, and sent sparks up toward the dark throat of the smoke hole. Now it has gone quiet. It glows rather than burns. Its flames are lower. It sounds smaller. It is thinking about sleep, too. You kneel before it with both hands out, letting the last generous heat gather on your knuckles and wrists. The warmth is uneven, but then nearly everything in your life is uneven. One cheek warms, one shoulder remains cold. The front of your legs feel almost comfortable, while the back of them remember perfectly well that the world outside is in no mood to forgive exposed skin. Across the room, the household is slowing by degrees. Someone is winding yarn. Someone else is checking a child's blanket and retucking it with a firmness that passes for tenderness in a tired house. The dog has taken possession of the best patch of floor by the hearth and is pretending not to notice anyone. A hen, brought in because Frost is a thief and foxes are worse, is settled into a basket lined with old cloth and looking deeply unconvinced by the whole arrangement. Somewhere beyond the wall, a cow shifts and lets out the low, resigned sound of a creature born to endure poor housing and humans with plans. This is how bedtime begins, not with a command, but with a soft retreat from the day. Tasks narrow, voices lower, movements lose their urgency. The room stops being a place where things happen and becomes a place where things are allowed to stop happening. You know this transformation in your body before you could ever explain it. It begins in the shoulders, which drop. It reaches the jaw, which unclenches. It settles in the belly once the last warm food is in it. Then, very gradually, it climbs toward the eyes. You lean in and bank the fire. This matters. A medieval hearth is not simply lit or unlit. It is negotiated with. Coals are drawn together, ashes pulled over them. Tiny red lives are hidden rather than extinguished. If the night behaves, if the wind does not bully the smoke in the wrong direction, if the house remains patient, there will still be warmth waiting under the gray in the morning. This act, done night after night, is half practicality and half hope. Please stay alive till dawn. That is what every banked ember means, whether anyone says the words or not. There is no harsh light overhead to argue with your body. No cold white glare. No chatter from another room. No stream of demands pretending to be entertainment. Firelight has a soft authority. It rounds off the edges of objects and teaches the eyes not to strain. It makes faces beautiful in a tired human way. It draws people closer without asking them to explain why. It is warmth, yes, but it is also timing. When the fire lowers, the body understands. Work is ending. Noise is ending. The world is narrowing to cloth. Darkness and breath. You sit there another moment, because this part is one of the true luxuries of the age, though nobody would call it that. The fire, the stillness after eating, the room becoming less useful and more merciful. The smell is smoke, old wood, damp wool, stale rushes, and the fading trace of whatever herb bundle someone hung weeks ago in the rafters. The air has weight to it. Outside, the cold is already gathering itself against the walls. Inside, there is one last little island of orange light in which no one is asking anything from you. Soon, though, it is time to leave the hearth and go to the bed. Calling it a bed may sound generous, but generosity is not always false. Sometimes it simply means seeing clearly what a thing is trying to do. In one house, a bed is a rope frame topped with a mattress tick stuffed with straw or wool or a few feathers, if fortune smiled in one season and not the next. In another, it is a low pallet laid over boards. In another still, if rank and money have had their say, it is a carved frame with hangings and curtains and a mattress so lofty it requires a step chest to climb into. Medieval Europe knew all these beds, and yet beneath the difference of status, they all solved the same problem. The body must be kept off the worst of the cold, wrapped, enclosed, and held for enough hours that tomorrow can be survived. Yours waits in the dim edge of the room. No grand thing, but familiar. The tick is lumpier than ideal because straw has a way of flattening where people need it most and stabbing where they need it least. The blanket folded on top of it is thick, though not by the standards of wealth. It smells of lanolin, old sleep, smoke, and the season. A second layer lies underneath, thinner, more threadbare, but still useful. Someone has already pushed a warmed stone or a hot brick wrapped in cloth toward the foot of the bedding. Its heat will not last all night. Nothing in the medieval world lasts all night except the cold. But it will last long enough to matter. If you are on a rope bed, it complains when you sit. If on a pallet, it exhales dry dust and settles under you. Either way, getting into bed is not a single movement. It is a small ceremony of arrangement. Pull the blanket back. Test the warm side. Shake out the top layer. Slide one foot in, then the other. Tuck the edge under your heels. Shift your hips until the least lumpy section reveals itself. Turn the pillow, if pillow there is, to the cooler side or the softer one, depending on mood. Everything is adjusted. Everything must be coaxed. In richer chambers, the bed curtains can be drawn, creating a tent within a room, a private climate in a world that rarely offers privacy. In poorer houses, the bed exists in the same space as daily life. The pot, the stool, the cradle, the mending basket, the chest, the broom, all remain in view until darkness becomes kind enough to erase them. Yet even then, the blanket makes its own boundary. Once it is over your shoulder and chest, the room is no longer entirely public. It is merely nearby. You lie down and feel the first honest relief of the night. The spine meets support, however imperfect. The calves lose their burden. The hands no longer need to lift anything, hold anything, stir anything, twist anything, carry anything, defend heat from the air, or shape grain into tomorrow's bread. The bed may not be soft, but it is permission. That is what matters. The day stops at this line. There is, too, the matter of how such a bed came to be ready for you at all. Medieval beds do not simply wait in a frozen state from morning to night. They are prepared into usefulness. During the day, the coverings may be folded back to air. Straw may be stirred with the hand or with a simple rake so that yesterday's body-shaped hollows do not become tonight's punishment. A child may be told to shake the blanket out at the door. A servant in a wealthy house may beat the bedding, smooth the linen, warm the pan, draw the curtains. In a poorer one, the same labor happens with fewer hands and less ceremony, but it still happens. Sleep is built before it is entered. If the tick is straw-filled, then the straw itself has its own life cycle. Fresh straw has spring in it, even a little sweetness, and the good fortune of not yet belonging to insects. Old straw flattens, browns, compacts, and turns suspiciously eloquent under the sleeper's ribs. It remembers every turn of the body and keeps the memory too long. That is why households pull it, replace it when they can, fluff it when they cannot, and try in all cases to persuade it to behave as though it has more generosity left than it really does. In richer settings, feather beds rise high and luxurious, but even these require beating, smoothing, turning, and airing. Feathers clump, linen dampens, curtains trap yesterday if nobody opens them. The chest at the bed foot deserves its own respect. It is more than furniture. It is storage for precious cloth, reserve blankets, spare shifts, perhaps the one better sheet kept for illness, guests, or holy days, and in many houses it functions as bench, step, table, and guardian of the night's softness. Before wardrobes and specialized furniture multiply, the chest keeps the fabric life of the household in one wooden belly. When it is opened before bed, the room changes. A better blanket may emerge. A dry shift, a tucked-away fur, even the smell that escapes. Cedar if lucky, old cloth if not, carries the feeling of preparation. You can imagine the order in which the bedding is arranged. Rougher cloth below, better cloth nearer the skin if the household is fortunate. Wool where weight is needed, linen where sweat or cleanliness must be thought of. A cloak folded twice becomes insulation. A patched old tunic fills the gap near the feet. A fleece may be turned one way in winter, another in summer. The knowledge is entirely domestic, passed from person to person without any need to become grand theory. You learn by sleeping badly a few times, and then listening to the person in the house who sleeps least badly. There is also the warming pan, in those rooms privileged enough to possess one. A metal pan with hot coals, run between sheets or beneath blankets before the sleeper slips in. It sounds delicious until one remembers that hot coals and bed hangings are uneasy companions. Medieval comfort is frequently shadowed by the possibility of a deeply foolish accident. Yet, people persisted because the temptation of entering a pre-warmed bed in a cold room is stronger than caution on many winter nights. In humbler houses, the same idea survives in safer, rougher forms. A heated stone, a brick by the fire, a cloth-wrapped pot, warmth stored in anything dense enough to hold it for a while. Children often know these negotiations early. They sleep where there is room, where there is warmth, where adults think they will fuss least, cough least, kick least, wake least often, though children rarely honor any of these hopes. One child may curl close to the mother, another may share a pallet with siblings. In some houses, babies sleep in cradles rocked by foot or hand until the room itself rocks them better. In others, they are wrapped near the bed, close enough that the lightest stirring becomes a household event. The night belongs to everyone, and therefore no one's sleep is entirely private from anyone else's needs. The old and the ill are arranged with equal practical tenderness. A grandparent nearer the warm side of the room, a feverish person with the better blanket. a convalescent body lifted to the higher bed while the healthy descend to the floor. None of this is sentimentality in the modern decorative sense. It is the hard kind of care that expresses itself in inches of distance from the fire, in who receives the softer pillow, in whether the warm stone is given away without remark. If you were noble, you might know a more formal version of these same instincts. Curtains drawn to keep drafts out, and status in, servants smoothing linen that the sleeper did not wash, storing the daybed covers in carved chests, placing a chamber pot where a midnight hand could find it without disaster. Yet rank does not remove the basic human choreography of lying down. Even kings must submit to blankets, pillows, and the small absurdities of bodies in sleep. A sumptuous mattress still needs turning. A grand bed still squeaks. Curtains do not silence snores. This is why the bed, however different from one rank to the next, remains one of the most democratic pieces of medieval life. It levels everyone by posture. It turns the rich sideways under fur, and the poor sideways under wool. And both must trust cloth, darkness, and gravity in the same old way. Once you are in it, the room begins another kind of transformation. The bed no longer appears as furniture. It becomes weather. Under its layers there is warmth, or the promise of warmth. Above them there is air cooler, by a degree that makes the enclosed space feel protected. If you lift the blanket, the cold returns as immediate proof. Lower it again, and the small cave of body heat reforms. This simple contrast can make a rough bed feel luxurious. The medieval sleeper does not expect perfect softness. The medieval sleeper expects the great relief of enough. And enough, when the day has been long, can feel astonishingly close to bliss. If your family is fortunate enough to own more than one blanket, then they are layered, not only for warmth, but for intelligence. Wool above, finer linen below if there is any. A folded cloak near the feet. An animal skin, perhaps. Hairy side turned where it will do the most good. Medieval bedding has no interest in elegance. It is strategy in cloth form. A cloak by day becomes insulation by night. A scrap of fur, no longer handsome enough for wearing, becomes priceless over the knees in the hours before dawn. Comfort in such a room is built from what could be spared and what could be repurposed. Now the body begins doing what bodies did so beautifully before electric light became a second sun. It starts to fall. The first sleep in a medieval house is not usually something one must negotiate into existence. It comes quickly to a tired person in real darkness. There is no late distraction, no endless shelf of small excitements trying to keep the senses awake. There is only the aftermath of labor, a stomach that has been given whatever warmth the house could afford, and the soft command of dimness. The eyelids grow heavy without complaint. The mind does not need much persuading. It is already walking toward the edge. You feel it first as surrender in the limbs. The feet are still aware of their own cold, but less so. The shoulders stop rehearsing the day. The face loosens. Under the blanket, breath makes a tiny private climate in the tunnel of cloth near your mouth and nose. The rest of the room withdraws. A child murmurs once and settles. Someone nearby shifts and then goes quiet. The dog sighs in the official tone of an animal who has accepted the night. In the hearth, a final coal slips inward and reddens beneath ash. This is one of the great differences between your world and theirs. Medieval people often lacked the perfect conditions modern people think they need for sleep, but they also lacked many of the things that now keep sleep away. They had drafts, yes. Noise, yes. Shared rooms, yes. Fleas sometimes. Lice often enough. A goat within moral distance. A hen in a basket. A blanket that smelled faintly of sheep and smoke, but they also had true darkness, body weariness, rhythmic lives, and the absence of endless artificial afterthought. Their beds could be harder. Their nights could still be deeper. You sink through the first sleep as though the body has been waiting for it since sunset. The room is gone now in the way rooms disappear when the sleeper trusts them. Not vanished, only no longer needing attention. The wall, the chest, the rafters, the dog, the quiet shapes of other people. All of it remains, but none of it calls to you. Time itself grows thick. If dreams begin, they begin at a depth you do not notice. If they do not, the dark still holds you. There is a great kindness in this kind of sleep. A sleep unobserved, unoptimized, undescribed. It does not care what it looks like from outside. It cares only that it is happening. But the medieval night often has more than one tide to it. At some point, without alarm or panic, you wake. The difference is immediate, but not unpleasant. You are not thrust upward by worry. You simply rise into a gentler wakefulness inside the same darkness. The blanket is still warm where it lies against you. The air beyond it feels colder, sharper, more watchful. The room itself is quieter than at the moment you fell asleep. Not because nothing exists, but because everything remaining has gone deep into itself. This middle watch, this hour or so between the first sleep and the second, has its own mood entirely. It is not the irritated insomnia of a modern person glancing at a clock and calculating tomorrow's damage. It is slower, softer, more spacious. You lie still and let your eyes open into the dark. There is no need to make anything happen. Being awake is not yet a failure in many households. It was part of the night's natural architecture. Perhaps you pray. That was common enough. Especially in cultures where the dark hours belonged partly to God. A whispered song, a remembered formula, a saint's name breathed into the wool and smoke. Perhaps you speak quietly to the person sharing the bed or the room. The kind of murmured conversation that can only happen when everything else has gone silent and the body is too warm to lie. Perhaps you simply think, reflect, let thoughts drift through the mind without trying to catch or improve them. In darkness without interruption, thought takes on a different weight. It is less urgent, more wandering. It moves like candle smoke. Some use this time for small tasks, a little mending by the banked fire, a quick look at the sleeping child, more wood coaxed toward ember if the cold had grown bold, a check on the latch, on the animal by the wall, on the weather sound outside. In a world of segmented sleep, the night could be something lived in, not just collapsed through. You lift a hand and discover, as people in drafty houses have done for centuries, that your nightcap has wandered. It had bunched near your ear, or under your shoulder, or hanging loose from where you tied it too casually. You pull it down again over your hair, and instantly understand why generations swore by such silly-looking things. A cold head is an argument a whole body loses. Medieval sleep clothing was not sentimental. It was strategy, linen shift, wool hose, a soft cap, a cloak pressed into service as extra bedding, a scrap of fur over the chest in bitter weather. All these layers were less about modesty than about survival, though modesty often came along for the ride. Hair itself could be treated as something to cover. The body at night was private, vulnerable, porous. Cloth became both warmth and boundary. You tug the cap ribbon under your chin, retuck the blanket over your shoulder, and feel yourself become warmer by design. There is a ritual sweetness to these gestures. They tell the body the night is still on your side. You are not being pushed into morning yet. You are being helped back down. Around you, the room begins to speak in its true night language. The first sounds are the sounds of the sleepers themselves. A soft snore from one corner, the quiet huff of someone turning over, a child's dream noise, half word and half breath. The dog's paws twitching as though running a small invisible errand. Cloth shifts, straw whispers, wood settles against wood. These sounds are intimate, immediate, and oddly reassuring. They mean the room is occupied not by silence, but by life at rest. Then there are the house sounds, a faint click in the cooling hearth, a little drift of ash, the beam above you adjusting to cold, the half-latched shutter giving one low tap as wind tests it. The basket by the wall creaking because the hen inside has decided to resettle her objections. The old chest at the bedfoot making the small deep noise old chests make when the night air changes around them. Beyond that are the village sounds. A dog farther away, giving a short bark and then seeming to regret the expenditure. Somewhere out in the lane, maybe boots on damp earth or frozen boards. Someone returning late or rising early, both possibilities equally medieval. If a church lies within hearing, the bell may carry through the dark with a seriousness that seems larger than metal. Not loud, merely inevitable? If you live near a watchman, perhaps a call drifts through the street. Weather and hour wrapped into one official human voice. If a stream or mill race runs nearby, its water speaks continuously in a tongue more dependable than any sermon. And farther still, the natural world keeps its own bedside manners. An owl from a tree beyond the byre, wind rubbing at the thatch, the horse shifting weight in the stable and exhaling like bellows. Rain, if there is rain, on wood or wattle. Snow, if there is snow. Doing that miraculous quiet thing snow does, where even the darkness seems muffled and tucked in. To a modern ear, this might sound like interruption. To a medieval one, it often meant security. The town breathes, the household breathes, the world is not empty. Nothing terrible has swallowed the ordinary noise of life. That alone can be comforting. You lie there listening until the sounds stop being individual events and become texture. This is perhaps the true sleep machine of the old world. Not silence, but layered quiet. Not nothingness, but a consistent field of low living sound into which the body can dissolve. Your breathing begins to match it without permission. The mind drifts more easily when it no longer demands total stillness from the world. There are other nighttime worlds folded into this same hour too, just beyond the range of your own blanket. Somewhere in the village, a traveler may be sleeping badly in a tavern loft, learning the difference between ale-warmed courage and actual bedding. Taverns are their own universities of sleep, benches used as beds, straw thrown down in corners, shared rooms full of boots, snores, muttering, and one candle extinguished too soon or too late. A merchant on the road may lie beside a stranger, separated only by cloak width and mutual indifference. A carter, too tired to mind fleas, may sleep more deeply than the wealthy man in the curtained bed one floor below. Comfort is not always where cost imagines it will be. In the same hour, perhaps, somewhere behind monastery walls, the bell is doing what bells do best, dividing darkness into obligations. A monk rises from thin bedding with the body's natural complaint against cold stone and obedient schedules. He wraps his robe around him and moves through corridors that smell of wax and damp lime. The chapel receives him with candlelight and chant. There, too, the night is being lived rather than simply passed through. Sleep is portioned, broken, returned to, sanctified by interruption. The same human body that longs to stay in bed also knows how to grow solemn in the dark when a bell gives its stern permission. And in a manor somewhere, Perhaps a lady lies awake not because she cannot sleep, but because too many people are near her sleep. A chambermaid by the door, a hound at the step, a child sent in because of fever, a husband not yet returned from drink or talk or estate worries. Thick curtains cannot keep obligations out. They only warm them. The noble bed can be private in appearance and crowded in experience. Rank offers fabric. It does not always offer stillness. Thinking of this softens something. Sleep in the old world is not one thing. It is a pattern shaped by work, by wealth, by prayer, by accident, by weather, by the decency of your roof, by the appetite of your fleas, by whether your child is teething, by whether the bell rings, by whether tomorrow is feast, market, harvest, or storm. Even the same person may sleep differently from one season to the next. A winter night lengthens and encloses. A summer night loosens. Bodies adapt with more grace than theories do. And because the night is lived by so many kinds of people at once, bedtime habits multiply, like folklore. Some kiss a crucifix, some stir embers and spit 3 times for luck. Some drink, some pray, some tell a final story, some scratch the dog behind the ears and trust that gesture more than any formal blessing. Some shake straw and mutter at the mattress, some untie hair and let that itself be the signal. Some count beads, some count sheep in one form or another long before the phrase becomes a joke. There are also the little practical discomforts that shape the watch hour and make it feel real rather than idealized. A bladder with medieval timing, a chamber pot in the corner that must be found by touch while trying not to wake the whole room. Bare feet on boards, or packed earth colder than any philosophy of sleep can justify. The decision whether leaving the blanket is truly worth it. The answer, as now, depends on urgency, age, weather, and stubbornness. If one rises, the room changes. Standing in a medieval house at night is very different from lying in one. The cold discovers your calves at once. The floor introduces itself bluntly. The air beyond the bed's warmth feels not cruel exactly, but unconcerned. Yet this brief discomfort can deepen the sweetness of returning. The blanket afterwards feels earned twice over. Even the smell of one's own bedding becomes a kind of welcome. Some people during the watch would speak softly. Shared sleeping arrangements created a strange intimacy in such hours. Words do not need daylight when the body is half asleep and the room is dark enough to level faces. A husband and wife may whisper about money or weather or the child's cough or whether the roof should be patched before the saint's day. Siblings may tell one another remembered nonsense. An old person may pass on a piece of advice as if it arose accidentally in the night rather than from long planning. Dark conversations are often more honest than bright ones, less performative, more willing to drift. And then there is the weather itself, which can become a full participant in the midnight interval. On still nights, the house seems suspended inside the dark, every small sound carrying farther. On windy ones, the whole structure develops a voice. Thatch muttering, shutters testing their hinges, smoke pulling wrong, draft finding the wrist or neck, ash shifting as air nudges the hearth. Rain can make the house sound larger, as if each drop counts the roof separately. Snow makes it feel smaller, tucked in. Hushed thunder, when it comes, alters the moral tone of the room entirely. A storm at night is not just sound but presence, as if the heavens have decided to walk overhead in boots. On those storm nights, medieval sleep becomes an art of yielding. You cannot silence the sky. You cannot consult a forecast. You can only trust the walls. Count the seconds between flash and sound if you are the sort of mind that counts, and lie close to others beneath wool, while the rafters prove their worth. Some sleepers pray more than. Some sleep through everything with scandalous calm. Some children cry until a hand finds them. Some adults pretend not to be listening to the roof. The night is never the same creature twice, nor is the body. Illness changes sleep more than architecture does. A cough in the room turns everyone into partial nurses and partial victims. A fever makes even good bedding feel wrong. A child with heat in the forehead may be shifted closer to the mother, away from the draft, into the better blanket. Broth appears, vinegar cloths, honey if there is honey, a whispered saint's name, a promise to make an offering if the fever breaks before dawn. The room's relation to sleep changes instantly. Rest becomes both more necessary and harder to trust. Watching a sleeper breathe can become the night's central task. And when the illness passes, the return of ordinary sleep feels like a feast no one had to cook. To hear a child breathing evenly again. To feel the room return from anxious listening to its normal textured quiet. To lie down without the need to keep one ear alert for distress. These too are forms of comfort. In a one-room world, one person's sleep belongs partly to everyone. The old world knew this in its bones. Sleep was not an individual performance. It was collective weather under a roof. Even so, once the body has moved through these small negotiations, the sounds begin again to flatten into texture. The watch loses its edge. Wakefulness grows velvety. Thoughts drift away from practicalities and back toward image, rhythm, memory, dream. The room has not improved. The roof is still itself. The floor is still cold. Someone still snores as if trying to saw through the dark. Yet your relation to all of it has softened. The night has absorbed its own difficulties and offered them back as background. That is when sleep begins preparing its second tide. Sometimes, however, the room offers more than sound. It offers scent. Someone earlier may have warmed a bedtime drink. Posset if milk, ale, wine, spice, and luck were available in a combination generous enough to allow it. Ale brew, broth thickened with bread, warm milk with honey if a household had reason to be hopeful. Medieval people understood what anyone with a cold evening and an empty stomach understands. Warmth swallowed slowly is one of the gentlest ways to close a day. You can almost taste it now if you imagine it. The softness of milk thickened slightly by heat. The faint sweetness of honey or sugar if money ever let such things pass through the house. A little spice, maybe clove, maybe nutmeg, maybe nothing more exotic than the memory of toasted grain. It is not modern hot chocolate. It is not elegant. It is the sort of drink that sits low in the body and says, in a language no one needs to translate, rest now. And if there is no drink, there may still be herbs. Lavender tucked into linen, rosemary above the bed, mint in a pouch under the pillow, valerian if someone swears by it, poppy in a small controlled measure, enough to suggest drowsiness rather than visions too busy for sleep. Medieval sleep remedies existed in that roomy old territory where medicine, ritual, superstition, and domestic habit all shook hands without embarrassment. A warm cup, a whispered prayer, a little iron charm, a sachet beneath the pillow, a cross made by the hand before lying down. All of these worked on the same principle. The sleeper should feel sheltered. Was it chemistry? Sometimes. Was it ritual? Certainly. Much of sleep is won not only by what enters the body, but by what the body is told through repetition. This cup means night. This smell means safety. This prayer means the room is close to trouble. This blanket means nothing more will be asked of you until dawn. Medieval households were good at such signaling. They had to be. There are darker beliefs too, of course. A world without modern explanations made generous room for presences, visitations, pressures in the night. Bad dreams might be blamed on spirits or devils, on an incubus, on a wandering soul, on poor digestion, on God's warning, on sin, on weather, on fate. So people guarded the bed, not only with cloth and heat, but with symbols. Iron under or near the bed, blessed words, protective knots, holy water. A formula whispered over a child's blanket, a charm tucked into the rafters, a knife pointed outward beneath the mattress in some regions. Because one more layer of protection, however symbolic, still felt like protection. It is easy to smile at such customs from a distance. It is harder to smile when you remember what it feels like to wake in darkness with the heart racing from some shapeless dream and to want, desperately, any ritual at all that might make the room feel claimed by goodness again. In that sense, the old protections are not so foreign. They are human. Who you are changes how you sleep too. If you are a peasant, your rest follows labor and weather more than theory. In winter, nights can be long, and sleep may stretch richly, though not always unbroken. In summer, dawn arrives with less mercy. The body rises because animals, fields, and tools do not care how poetically you slept. Your work teaches your body exhaustion honestly, and exhaustion becomes one of your surest sleep aids. If you are a monk or nun, the bell has authority over your night. Prayer interrupts sleep, and sleep bends around devotion. Matins in the deep dark, a return to bed, a later rising. The whole structure of rest is shaped by obedience and sacred time. Even there, though, human drowsiness remains stubbornly human. Chanting in the cold has rocked many a holy person toward unintended dreams. If you are an artisan in town, your life is governed by light and customers, and the cost of candle use. Work stretches only so far into darkness before eyes tire and expense becomes foolish. So bed comes when it makes sense, rather than when some internal philosophy says it should. If you are wealthy, you may possess a better mattress, thicker curtains, more servants to prepare your chamber, and less peace than anyone assumes. Rank often buys fabric long before it buys quiet. What unites all of these lives is not an exact number of hours, but rhythm. Medieval people often slept in relation to seasons, prayers, labor, and available light. The day was not a fixed machine into which sleep had to be squeezed. Sleep was one of the tides the whole day moved by. That is why early bedtimes in winter could feel natural rather than lazy. That is why segmented sleep could feel ordinary rather than alarming. That is why an afternoon doze in hay or shade might be a practical kindness rather than a moral failure. Even if sermons like to wag fingers about sloth, bodies know what they need, particularly when no screen is trained to make them forget it. The room you lie in reminds you of all this because it is only half separated from the weather. The shutter is a defense, but not a perfect one. A crack admits a line of colder air, and when the moon is placed just right, a blade of light. The roof holds, though perhaps not proudly. The wall keeps out most of the wind. There is no illusion of total separation here. You are indoors, but not removed. The season still reaches you in winter. Breath can bloom in front of your face if the fire dies too low. In summer, the room may hold the ripe smell of fruit, hot earth, bodies, and stored grain. In rain, the sound enters the house long before the damp does. In clear weather, moonlight drifts in so gently across the floor that it seems to belong to the room as much as to the sky. Some people have looked up through a small failure in the thatch and seen stars while lying in bed, not metaphorically, literally. A poor roof can still be a poetic one. This closeness to weather changes the feeling of sleep. The natural world does not stop at the wall. It presses against it, breathes near it, and occasionally comes softly through. The air inside the house changes with the hour. The smell changes with the season. Dawn enters gradually through cracks and slats rather than being announced by a digital timepiece. You are not sealed in a perfect chamber. You are held in a threshold, and thresholds are rarely solitary places. There are other bodies in the dark. Perhaps family, perhaps servants, perhaps children. Perhaps one old relative who seems to have opinions even in sleep. Privacy in the modern sense is not the organizing principle here. Space is limited. Heat is valuable. Bed frames and bedding are not cheap enough to indulge everyone's wish for isolation. So the room is full. A brush of foot against ankle under the blanket may belong to a sibling or spouse or a child. On the coldest nights, a dog who has simply made a practical decision. In such a world, proximity becomes less embarrassing and more structural. People sleep close because close is warmer. Then there are the animal companions whose help is rarely requested in beautiful language. Dogs, of course, with their superior instinct for the warmest patch in any building. Cats, if they are feeling charitable, walking the blanket edge with silent paws and curling where they would be least thanked. In poorer rural houses, a hen indoors, a goat near enough to be audible, a piglet in desperate weather. All these things have happened. Heat does not become useless simply because it comes in the shape of livestock. None of this means the room is idyllic. Medieval sleeping spaces had plenty of nuisances. Fleas, lice, bedbugs, mites. The whole impatient republic of tiny opportunists that thrive where cloth, fur, straw, and human closeness meet irregular washing. People knew them well. Straw mattresses could be refreshed, shaken, fluffed, or aired. Herbs could be used for scent and in hope of discouragement. Vinegar, garlic, smoke, mint, marjoram, all had their believers. Sometimes the remedies worked a little. Sometimes they mainly improved the smell of suffering. Yet even this irritant-ridden truth folds into the larger emotional reality of medieval sleep. Discomfort was social too. You were seldom the only one scratching. The room understood. The century understood. That kind of shared inconvenience can make a thing less lonely. And loneliness is perhaps one of the least medieval features of the night. The medieval imagination admitted many more companions to the dark than the modern one typically prefers. Spirits, devils, saints, dead relatives, fair folk, all could hover at the edge of explanation. Nightmares were not always treated as mere nonsense. They could be visitations, warnings, attacks, soul struggles, signs. Sleep paralysis could become incubus. A heavy fear upon the chest could become spiritual evidence. What happened in sleep mattered, because sleep was one of the places where the self seemed least defended. This gave dreams enormous importance. You are there now, or almost, not awake, not deeply asleep, but floating near the place where images loosen from logic and become their own strange weather. A field appears where there should be a room. A face known to you in daylight turns solemn and unreadable in moonless dark. A dog speaks in a voice that seems entirely normal until you wake later and remember it was a dog. Medieval dream books, sermons, stories, and daily conversations all reveal how seriously such things could be taken. Bread in a dream might suggest plenty. Falling might suggest danger, water, fire, speaking animals, dead kin, saints, all arrived freighted with interpretive possibility. Perhaps dreams were read more gravely in some places than others. Perhaps some laughed them off, and others confessed them. Perhaps one household's prophecy was another household's indigestion. The point is not that everyone believed the same thing, but that dreams were not trivial by default. They belonged to the same moral and symbolic universe as waking life. So, if you wake with a dream clinging to you, you do not necessarily brush it away like static. You hold it for a moment, consider it. Was that warning? Memory? Nonsense? Message? The answer need not be clean. Medieval explanations were wonderfully willing to overlap. A dream could be caused by cheese, guilt, fever, the devil, God, and your sleeping position all at once if the world felt large enough to allow it. And still, for all the strange freight dreams carry, some of them are merely human. Quarrel replayed absurdly, a missed purchase of candles becoming a catastrophe in sleep, a goose in church, a fish in a crown, a saint arriving only to say something unhelpful. Human sleep has always had room for nonsense. You drift through it, the dream brightens, then fades. What remains is not the image itself, but the texture of having been elsewhere. A softness in the mind, a slight hesitation before returning fully to the room. And in that hesitation, the world can widen. Beyond this house, beyond this village, beyond your language and your centuries' local habits, other people are sleeping too, under other roofs and in other climates, shaping rest to fit their worlds. Somewhere in a warm city of the Islamic world, families may carry bedding to a rooftop or open courtyard to catch the night breeze. The stars above them clean and unhindered by northern frost. Cushions laid out, woven mats, air moving freely where stone walls held too much heat by day. Prayer and conversation lingering later into the evening because the climate invited wakefulness after sunset. Elsewhere in China, on a heated brick kang, whole families might gather on a raised, warmed platform that serves both as living space by day and sleeping place by night. Heat moving underneath through clever channels so the body settles onto warmth that has been prepared long before the moment of rest. In another room, perhaps more refined, a sleeping platform with curtains and carved wood turns the bed into a place not only of sleep but of reading, childbearing, reflection, ancestors, privacy made by structure rather than by solitude. In Japan, a bed may not stand up on legs at all, but lie close to the floor in the form of layered bedding spread and gathered according to the room's uses. The boundary between day and night marked by arrangement rather than architecture. In parts of Africa, sleep may grow out of evening storytelling, the oral world doing for the mind what firelight does for the body, calming, ordering, preparing. Along coasts, the sound of water becomes part of the night's weave. In colder northern places, animal skins and enclosed spaces speak more loudly than breezes and stars. The details change. The human project remains astonishingly constant. Everywhere people invent night out of what they have. Heat or airflow, cloth or mats, prayer or song, herbs or incense, shared rooms or curtain niches, rituals that tell the body the same thing in different languages. You may let go now. The day is finished. This thought does not wake you. It relaxes you further. Sleep has always been a craft, not one perfect method, but 1,000 local ways of persuading the body into trust. Your little room in medieval Europe is only one example among many. That makes it feel smaller and gentler somehow. One ember in a much older human practice. The world narrows again. Back to your house. Back to the shutter. Back to the room's own complicated piece. Something stirs you once more. A bell, perhaps, depending on how near the church lies and how much authority it claims over sleeping bodies. A rooster, certainly, though never with the exact timing it imagines. A child needing comfort. A shift in the weather. The dog shaking itself with intolerable enthusiasm. Someone finding the chamber pot in the dark by touch and hope alone. This is another secret of historical sleep. It was rarely uninterrupted. Perfect sleep did not mean uninterrupted sleep. It meant sleep resilient enough to absorb interruption and return from it. The night had bells, babies, wind, animals, prayer times, and too many people under one roof. Yet because expectations were different, because the whole structure of rest was less rigid and more rhythmic, disturbance did not automatically become crisis. You wake, you note the sound, you rearrange a blanket, perhaps you mutter. Perhaps someone mutters back. Perhaps you smile into the dark because the same rooster has been rude for years, and still no one has eaten him. Then you lie still again. The room does not become hostile just because it is imperfect. It remains a holding place. Even the moral voices that hover around sleep in medieval culture. Warnings against sloth, reminders of prayer, sermons suspicious of indulgence, cannot entirely erase the body's own desires. On a bitter morning, people lingered. They pulled the blanket up a little higher. They waited another minute before answering the bell. The child, the day, the cold floor. Human beings have always negotiated with dawn. You are doing it now. The darkness has thinned, not vanished, only softened. What was black is now charcoal. What was invisible is becoming outline. The shutter admits a pale seam of sky that looks almost silver. The wall beside the bed is slowly recovering its roughness. The chest at the foot of the bedding emerges from shadow. A sleeping face nearby turns faintly visible. Dawn is not entering. It is rehearsing itself. This may be the sweetest part of the night, or rather, the sweetest part of the end of the night. The moment before rising, when warmth is at its most precious because it is about to be surrendered. The room is colder now than it was when you first lay down. The blanket is warmer by contrast. Your body has made a hollow of heat in the bedding and does not wish to abandon it. The warm stone at your feet has gone mostly cool, but still carries the memory of its former usefulness. The air at the tip of your nose is cold enough to keep the rest of your face grateful. You stay where you are. One more minute, then another. The house itself seems to agree. Nothing rushes at first light in a medieval room. The fire is still ash. The dog is still curled. The child has not yet decided whether waking is worth announcing. Outside, the rooster continues its campaign. A cow answers with indifference. If there is a bell, it does not so much command as remind. Morning is coming whether you leap to meet it or not. And here, under the blanket, you understand something your century knows, but does not always remember. Perfect sleep has very little to do with perfection. It is not flawless silence. It is not a room engineered beyond weather. It is not a mattress chosen from 100 options by reading contradictory reviews. It is not total privacy, total control, total predictability. It is rhythm. It is darkness that arrives honestly. It is a body made ready by real tiredness. It is a fire banked carefully. It is cloth wrapped with intention. It is a room whose noises become familiar enough to trust. It is the possibility of waking and sleeping in more than one tide. It is the old domestic magic of herbs, warm drinks, prayers, repeated gestures, and bodies nearby. It is the ability to let the world be imperfect without turning that imperfection into war. The medieval secret, if there is one, is not comfort without trouble. It is surrender without endless resistance. You understand this even better when you imagine how differently the same room behaves across the year. In winter, everything is built around keeping warm enough to stay reasonable. Blankets multiply. Breath is visible. Bodies cluster. The fire is watched with something like reverence. Cold teaches the household to sleep close, to tuck in hems, to value the hot stone near the feet as if it were a jewel. The room smells of smoke more strongly then, of damp wool drying badly, of skins, stored apples if any remain, and the enclosed life of too many beings solving the same problem at once. In summer, the very same room becomes another country. The blanket is pushed low or abandoned entirely. Shutters stand open if they can. Air matters more than heat. Straw smells sweeter and dustier. The dog prefers the threshold. Flies become the loudest critics. Children sleep with limbs flung in every direction because the body seeks space when it can no longer seek warmth. A sleeper may lie awake for a while, listening not to winter wind, but to insects and late laughter drifting from outside. The room is still communal, still imperfect, still alive, but the body reads it differently. Where winter says curl inward, summer says sprawl and wait for a breeze. Autumn has its own sleep, full of harvest fatigue. Stomachs heavier after better suppers. Barns and lofts holding the day's labor in their smell. Straw is freshest then. The house feels provisioned if the year has been kind. Sleep after harvest has a special heaviness, a body deep knowledge that something necessary has been brought in from the fields. Spring, by contrast, can make sleep restless. The weather shifts. Mud clings to everything. Roofs drip. Lambs or calves arrive at rude hours. Dawn comes earlier and the body follows, even if the bones would rather negotiate. The medieval year is not only seen and worked, it is slept. Age changes it too. A child sleeps like a thrown coat, wherever dropped, deep until startled or hungry. A youth sleeps hard from growth and labor, then wakes faster. The middle years sleep under responsibility. One ear, ready for the baby. The weather, the animal, the cry in the yard. The old sometimes sleep in fragments, waking often not because the bed is worse, but because the body has grown more porous to memory, discomfort, and time. An old person in a medieval house knows the watch hour intimately. That is not always a curse. Sometimes it is a companionship. There are social occasions that alter the night as well. Feast days, weddings, christenings, wakes, saints' eves. All of these push sleep later. Fill it with richer food. Stronger drink, more voices, more laughter, more storytelling than the ordinary evening allows. After such nights, the bed receives not quiet exhaustion, but a warm disorder. Someone snores louder. Someone dreams stranger. A child falls asleep on a bench and is carried. A guest remains because the road is dark and the house, however full, has one more corner to offer. The next morning comes sooner than anyone deserves. And yet the memory of communal brightness lingers in the bedding. Travel changes sleep, perhaps most of all. To sleep away from one's own room in the Middle Ages is to lose half one's rituals at once. The right blanket not present, the familiar smell absent, the known creak of the bed replaced by another, unknown insects, unknown drafts, unknown people breathing within hearing. Travelers adapt because they must. Cloaks become bedding. Saddlebags become pillows. A settled body learns quickly how much it relies on recognition. The first night somewhere new can feel longer in any century, but in one without electric reassurance, the foreign dark is truly foreign. Yet human beings remain astonishing. By the second or third night, even a rough inn corner begins to acquire the shape of habit. Habit is one of the hidden monarchs of sleep. It is why the same prayer matters night after night, why the hand reaches for the blanket edge the same way, why the dog settles in the same place, why the fire is banked with the same gesture, Why a mother can tuck a child in almost blind and still do it correctly. The ritual is not decoration. It is a path worn through uncertainty. Each repeated act tells the body and the mind that night has happened before and ended safely enough to allow another beginning. Even dreams bow a little to habit. The mind goes wandering where it will, but it does so from the same straw, the same pillow, the same smell of smoke, the same pressure of wool over chest and shoulder. Perhaps that is why old beds can feel wise. They are not. Of course, they are only cloth and wood and stuffing. Yet they have witnessed the mind leaving and returning so many times that they begin to seem like guardians of passage. Think of all that medieval beds held. Ordinary sleep, fever sleep, childbirth recovery, lovers whispering, old people listening to weather, children wetting straw, soldiers home for one night, guests unexpectedly permanent, monks dreaming of bells, merchants counting losses in the dark, widows learning the new geography of half a bed, children hearing stories that trail into dreams, bodies dying, babies waking, fires going out, fires catching, rain leaking, snow hushed at the eaves, rats in the wall, saints in the imagination. Beds were never only for rest. They were theaters of vulnerability. And yet, precisely because the bed held so much life, it could hold sleep without needing to idealize it. Sleep did not have to be pure to be effective. It only had to be allowed. That is what the modern world often forgets. It imagines that rest arrives only once every condition has been perfected. The medieval room suggests another truth. Rest can arrive among flaws, among noises, among shared space, among weather, among obligations waiting at dawn. Rest may even arrive more readily when it is not micromanaged to death. This does not mean the old world had a superior secret in every respect. Far from it. Cold was real, pests were real, danger was real, pain, grief, hunger, fear, all could climb into bed with a person. But the structure of night still contained more natural cues, more communal holding, more ritual, and less artificial agitation than many of us now inherit. That matters. So as dawn gathers, you feel not that you have discovered a perfect method, but that you have been reminded of a simpler contract. Work enough that tiredness means something. Dim the light until the body believes it. Repeat the same gentle acts until they become a path. Let interruption be part of the rhythm, not proof of failure. Let the room be inhabited. Let the dark be textured. Let sleep come in tides if it wishes. And when it does come, do not interrogate it too much. Just let the old bed do what generations of beds have done. Hold the body still long enough for the soul, however one imagines it, to rest nearby. The room stirs at last. Someone near the hearth coughs. A blanket is pushed back. The dog stands, stretches in a slow arc, and circles once as if considering whether to recommit itself to bed. From beneath the ash, if fortune has not entirely deserted the house, one or two tiny red points may still remain waiting to become morning fire. In a little while, someone will kneel where you knelt last night and coax them back toward flame. The cycle will begin again. Heat, labor, food, dusk, embers, sleep. But not yet. For one final little stretch, you belong not to the day but to the scene between night and duty. The pale light on the shutter, the dim blue breath of the room, the blanket under your chin, the smell of wood smoke gone faint, and wool gone warm, the sound of another sleeper still dreaming nearby, the knowledge that nothing more is required of you in this exact moment. This is the last softness. You close your eyes once more, not because you are determined to sleep again, but because there is pleasure in not fully leaving the night. If another wave of drowsiness comes, you welcome it. If it does not, then resting there at the edge is enough. Your mind is soft. Your limbs are heavy. The room, though imperfect, has held you well. So let the village wake slowly without your help. Let the rooster insist. Let the bell mean what it means. Let the light grow pale and patient on the wall. Let the house become visible by degrees. Let the old bed keep you for one breath more, then another. The darkness has done its work. The fire will return. The day can wait one gentle minute more. You pull the blanket a little higher. The cold touches only the very tip of your nose. Your breath rises warm and vanishes in the faint blue of almost morning. Somewhere between the last dream and the first chore, between the watchful dark and the ordinary demands of daylight, you drift in the calm center of a medieval dawn. Not flawless, not silent, not private, not modern, but deeply, strangely, beautifully at rest.